Hello and welcome to this tutorial on 2 different ways to repair the inseam on stretch twill pants. So as you can see here, I have a rubbing from basically the inner thighs. It's a pretty common problem. That's what it looks like on the inside. So you want to find fabric that is as close as you can get in color. This is green, so it's a little difficult. That was too light, so I had to dye this, and that was about as close as I could get it was dyeing. So now I need to measure the area for the patch. And so I take the ruler and I'm just kind of looking at it. I think it ended up being about 4 by 2.5 inches. And it ended up being about the same amount on both sides. So now I'm going to cut my patches, and I'm also keeping in mind that I want to add a little bit for a seam allowance. And right now I'm just trimming it down to size, and I'm going to clean up the edges as well. And then I need 2 patches. And thankfully they're both the same size, so I can use the first patch as my template. So now that I have my patches cut, this first method is going to be how I would do this patching by machine. So I need to mark the area on my pants where I'm going to be lining up with the patch. So now that I have an idea of where that patch is going to be, I'm marking inside there, because where I've marked it is more where I'm going to actually stitch it, so I don't want to be cutting where I'm stitching. That wouldn't work very well. So carefully cutting out this area of the pant that is compromised. And then I'm just kind of notching it in at the corners, and I'm going to be checking the fit of that patch. So here it turns out I can cut in a little bit closer to the seam there, which is good. And I can notch it a little bit more. So the next step is to get the pants to be inside out, so that I can get to that open area that I just cut, and then I'm going to line my patch up with that, and I'm going to start pinning it in place. And I'm starting around the corners, and I'm just kind of going around and trying to line the patch up to where it's going to be about as flat as I can get it. So now that I have everything pinned, I take it over to the machine, and then I will do a little bit of adjusting of the pins so that I can stitch where I want to. So for this first stitch, for this first seam, I'm stitching right up against that inseam. And then I'm just doing that as a separate stitch because that was going to need to be flipped to the other side so that I could see where that inseam was. And then the rest of it, I'll actually be stitching it from the patch side so that I can go all the way around very carefully. So now I'm just kind of adjusting the pins so that I can go ahead and stitch that. Now the pro of this particular method is it is a faster way to stitch the patch. The con of the method I found was that it's not as accurate, and it is possible to have parts in the little corners that don't completely stitch through. So I ended up having to hand tack that, which I'm not showing in the video here. It also took a little bit of time to kind of line things up and adjust. But it is overall a faster way to patch, and if you have a patch that is in a part of your clothes that is not going to be seen, but is still important to have there, like, for example, in the inner thigh area of an inseam, then this is a good way to go. My second method is going to be by hand, and so I am taking the patch and I'm going to do a little bit of a fold over seam. I'm ironing that so that that is already folded in place and I don't have to do that by hand as I go along. It's just a more accurate way of doing this. And then I'm going to go ahead and line this up on the pants. I left one side of it not ironed so that I can just flip that over wrong sides together over by that part of the inseam, and that way I can stitch that up against that area and get it pretty close in there. So now I'm just setting up a ruler in there. You could set up a book, something that is hard. And that way I don't accidentally stitch extra layers of my pants together. And then I'm just starting the seam, and I've doubled up the thread so that it's going to be a very strong thread. And I'm just carefully going through, and I'm trying to stitch as straight a line as possible going all the way across. And given that it takes a while to do hand stitching, a lot of this is going to be sped up quite a bit. And I just wanted to show getting to the end of this first bit so that I could show folding over the patch and lining that up before I continue with actually appliquing this patch down. So now that I have this stitched all the way to the edge, I'm going to be folding this patch over, and then I'm going to flatten everything out and line everything up with the patch against the pants, and then go ahead and secure that with pins before going ahead and stitching for the rest of this patch. So I'm just flipping this around because it's easier for me to stitch that direction. And then I'm just, as much as possible, trying to be taking the edge of that patch and lining it up directly with the pant underneath to make a nice straight line. And I will be doing that going all the way around the patch. So after some stitching that I did off camera, because it was kind of awkward stitching at that angle on the table, I'm just finishing up the last of the stitching here, and I have to go around that corner. I didn't start all the way in at that corner, as you might have noticed. And I didn't want to be all the way at the corner because I had a knot there. So this way I don't have a knot that's sticking right out at a corner. So now that I'm done, I have to trim off my thread there. And then I'm going to flip my pants inside out once again. And I will find where the applique patch is, so right there, and then I'm going to carefully cut that away so that I can have my seams be pretty similar to what I did with the folding under of that applique patch. So now that I have that cut away, I'm just going to notch in those corners. I'm also trimming off the folded over bits. I'm doing that because I want to be able to press these seams open, and I'm trying to eliminate bulk as well so that those corners aren't going to poke up. I'm trying to have things very nice and flat for my finish. So my next step, I've put a pressing ham underneath where these patches are at, and I'm pressing these seams open. So on that side, that was the side that I stitched down by machine. And I'm just, applying a little bit of water just so I can loosen up those fibers and have it be even more of a crisp type of press when I'm pressing those seams open. And then I'm gonna reposition the pressing ham, and I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, which is the hand applique that I just showed in this video. And as you can see here, you can see how much more accurate the hand applique method is. It actually does look quite a bit tidier with the pressing open of these seams. It's very noticeable. But like I said, If this is in a spot of your clothes where it's not going to be noticeable by anyone other than yourself when you're putting the garment on, then you could go with the machine stitching. It is actually quite a bit faster. So right now I am using some dark interfacing. It's a fusible interfacing, and it's actually more of a very dark gray, near black, and you use that for dark colored garments. So for this particular garment, that was going to work better than going with regular white interfacing. And so I'm just cutting this to size so it can go over those patched areas and go over the ironed down seams. The reason why I am doing this is so that these pressed open seams will stay pressed open for as long as this garment is going to be worn. Because once you wash the pants, if you don't have this step on there, those seams are not going to be pressed open anymore. So this is a reinforcing step just to make sure that those seams are going to be nice and flat, and there's not going to be any kind of bumpiness to that area. This is just a nice final finishing step. It also smooths out the area so that up against your skin it's actually pretty smooth. And basically just use an iron to fuse it down and try to make sure that all of the edges are fused down as well. And now I'm going to reveal what the patches look like. So here we go. You can see the patches because the fabric is a slightly different color, but it does blend in pretty well. And right there on the right side was the machined, and on the left side was the hand applique. And they both look pretty good, and they wear really well. Thank you for watching this video.